Hello, welcome back to Called to Homeschool, episode number 302. Exciting news, friends. How is everyone doing? I am doing great over here. Do you want to know why? Because my daughter comes home in 7 days, and I am so stinking excited to see her. It has been 18 months since I have actually seen her face to face. So I cannot wait. I'll probably talk about this again next week because I'm so darn excited. But that is like the most happy, exciting thing in my life right now. So just doing amazing, getting ready for her. Like I said, nervously nesting. You nest when a baby comes home or when your adult children come home, I guess. I didn't know it was a thing, but really excited about that. But I want to dive in today's podcast episode. Exciting news. You guys know, if you've been listening to me for a long time or if you're in my membership, my favorite emotion is excitement. I get all sorts of fired up when I am excited, right? And so I am really, really excited about this. And I added exclamation points and everything all over the place, which my husband always teases me, like, you don't need to put in more than one. Like, that's how excited I am. Excuse me. So before we dive in, let's talk about how have I been doing? Why in the world do I have even some exciting news in the first place? Well, a lot of you know last year was a big year of transitions for me, and it was interesting. Midlife transition's a nicer word than midlife crisis, but it really felt like a midlife crisis last year of like, I don't even know what's going on. I had a lot of transitions last year. I had my first wedding, and that was exciting. I have a daughter-in-law now. I also found out I'm going to be a grandma, which is super duper exciting. I had another kid move out. Now I have more kids who live out of the house than in the house. Our homeschool is so different now than what it looked like in the beginning. I had the two teens who are really independent with their learning. So it's mostly just homeschooling one kid, which I did an episode about that, right? So another big transition. Just a lot of emotions came up for me and that were really interesting. And it was funny. People, I'd run into somebody and they're like, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of a midlife crisis." And my husband goes, "Transition. Say transition." It's such a nicer word. But it really, there were so many emotions that came up for me. And it was just a really interesting year and navigating my kids not needing me so much physically and just like, what's my purpose? I don't know what do I do now? And one of the ways that I started to deal with emotions that came up for me was that I started working more, right? Like, kind of, my kids don't need me as much. So I guess I'll just go help all these other people, which is sounded really like a good thing. And obviously, I love helping other people, right? But as the year progressed and I was able to process during the emotions that came up with the transition, and realizing that my kids still do need me. It's just very different that they don't need me physically like they used to, but they still need me emotionally. And so, although I'm not clipping fingernails and tying shoes, I am now talking about marriage and what are you going to do with your life, and all the things that are coming up for my kids, and all the things with teenagers and fun things. And so, they still do need me. It's just in a very different way. And I realized that I had taken on too much. And so then, well, as I tend to do, sometimes I'm a little bit black and white. So I swung the other way and was like, well, then I got to let go of all these extra things that I added into my life. And friends, let's be honest, I almost quit the podcast. I even had an episode ready. I hadn't recorded it, but an outline ready to tell you that this was the last episode. Like, I'm done. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. Right. And luckily, Heaven intervened on that one. And it was so interesting because I was like, I'm done. I'm going to quit the podcast. And all of a sudden, I got flooded with the sweetest messages. So thank you to anybody who just had a feeling and impression to send me a nice message of just how the podcast really helped them and how that's given them the courage to homeschool and how it's helped their homeschool. So thank you for all of you who followed on a prompting and kept this podcast going because I was thinking I was done. But one of the other things that I did to lighten my own load was to quit making the lesson plans, which brings me to the exciting news. So, feeling completely overwhelmed with the things that I had taken on, and I didn't make any lesson plans for February. And then I started getting the messages and more messages from people who use the lesson plans and love them. I felt really torn because it was really consuming my time, and my babies do still need me, just in a very different way. And this is where the exciting part comes in. If you're in my membership, you're already familiar with Coach Emily. Coach Emily is amazing, and she's worked with me for a while now. She helps me cover the private sessions in the memberships, and she covers the group calls if I'm ever out of town. She is a lovely and a delightful human, and I feel honored to have her already working with me. And I threw out the idea to her of possibly helping me with the lesson plans moving forward to keep them going. And she said yes. So, friends, the monthly lesson plans are back and they are happening again, and they are so much better. So, I am still helping pick most of the books because I love to, but I have a lot of Emily's input with that as well. But Emily is so beautifully artistic, and she is making the whole thing beautiful. That is not my gift. When I talk about simplifying your life or doing things that bring you joy or whatnot, I never say, like, for me, really decorating my house or putting in a lot of time to making something really, really beautiful. Not that I want my house to be trashed or ugly, right? But it is not my gift to make something very appealing and beautiful. I'm a great doer. I am a great hard worker, but making things really pretty is not my gift. And it was consuming me with trying to force myself to try to make it look good or try to do all of these things. And so bringing in somebody that is her gift and her wheelhouse is everything. And she busted out our first lesson plans so much quicker than I ever have, right? Because she's just good. She's really, really good at it. And so I am going to go over what I have and Emily and I have for March's lesson plans. And I'm excited to be offering these to you again. So, switched things up again. Excuse me. Where originally when I did them, right, they were really intensive with all the things that you could do, and that felt like way too much. So then I stripped them down to just the books, which felt a little too light. And so now it's a book and an activity, which feels like the right spot where I had to do like Mama Bear and was too much, Papa Bear too little, right? And now finding that baby bear of just right. And these ones feel really, really amazing. So really focusing on they're really Charlotte Mason heavy ideas of the books, which is also Well Educated Heart, right? Anything that is really heart focused. I am such a big fan with Charlotte Mason of life skills. I think it is so imperative and so important. And I do have life skills as a big part of all my lesson plans. So all my lesson plans include life skills, the arts, science, and history. And this can be for the whole family. Some of these little books, even some of these little picture books, I will have my teen read by themselves. Like maybe they don't want to sit with me to do a read aloud, but they will read them by themselves, and they learn so much about history because the book is engaging. Maybe it's short and sweet, it's giving them the highlights. And if it piques their interest and they're like, oh, I want to know more about this, they already have a pretty good foundation to then go and start researching and studying on their own if when they find something that they really love. So I'm really excited about that. So this month for life skills, we are focusing on physical and have a workbook and everything that but my son Tico wrote that we'll be going over. And what I did and that we'll be doing moving forward is you also get life skill ideas of additional things that you may want to focus on this month, because it always blows my mind what people do when they have direction, right? So when I do No Yell November and people are like, okay, I'm really focusing on not yelling and being patient instead, the progress that they made. I'm doing a challenge with my son who wrote the workbook in his gym of eating 2 servings of veggies today and some fruit and tracking our sleep and getting 8 hours of sleep, right? And it's been crazy about how much better I feel with just being really intentional of making sure I get my veggies. And it's been funny because my husband's doing the challenge too. And so sometimes at like 10 o'clock at night, he's like, crap, I didn't eat another serving of veggie. So he's just in the fridge, like gnawing down a carrot or celery. He's like, I got to get my veggie points in. So I have a whole list of different ideas with life skills you could do with physical. So this could be hygiene, it could be with cooking, laundry, first aid, things that you could do physically, exercise. So some really fun skills in there that if you're like, okay, this is the age appropriate one for my kids, let's work on this skill, right? Let's do this. Like this is the beauty of homeschooling is we get this time in this space to actually teach our children skills that will benefit their lives and that will help them to be successful adults. So I'm so super excited that that is included. And as most of you know, history is my favorite. So we just kind of follow history. And so in January, it was going west. And February. Did I say what month was that? January? I don't know what I just said. But anyways, then I skipped a month. And hopefully you still found something amazing to do. And now we're going to move into the Civil War. And we're going to make this at least two parts. Part one is kind of the outline of the war and highlighting some of the big battles and why there was a civil war and just some of the basics with the Civil War. And so, not getting into a lot of biographies with anybody specific in the Civil War, but just kind of what it was, who was in it, some really fun activities with it, a game, all sorts of amazing things that come with that. So then for science, how fun is this? Is to study Clara Barton, who was part of the Civil War. And so studying anatomy with learning about her. So our science is going to be, which is great because we're physical this month too, and with anatomy and just really tying all that in together. So some really fun books with about Clara Barton, Inside Your Body, right? So books about that and some really amazing things and activities that you can do. And then for the arts, we are going to do Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman wrote "Oh Captain, My Captain," and he was a big Lincoln fan. And so he has some poetry about him and that time period. So great to study about him. And the music, we are going to do a composer who was really big in the Civil War that you may have not heard about because there are really no books about him. So just some links to learn about him and YouTube links to hear his music and some amazing things that you can do with the arts, right? And you know what's interesting because so I've had all these Civil War books at my house, and George is equally obsessed with history as I am. And so we were looking through all of them, and there are real pictures from the Civil War. Cameras had been invented by this time, right? So then we went down a rabbit hole of looking up pictures and from soldiers and their camps, and they had like what types of guns they used and what that looked like. And they still had swords at that time. And so that was really interesting. So for your art, a lot of that could be looking up the actual pictures of the actual war, right? And we didn't look up anything bloody or grotesque, but just pictures of people in the war. And it'd be kind of fun to maybe recreate that, take a picture with your phone, make it look like an old timey photo, something fun like that that you could do with learning about the Civil War. And then I have a read aloud. And then what I did is I have book suggestions for teens. And so I have two ideas. Instead of putting it for older teen and younger teen, you can just look at the books and decide which one is best for your teen. But to do one of the physical skills books, instead of doing a book about food or nutrition, I thought it would be really fun to do books about inspiring people who did something physically challenging. And so the true story of this teen who climbed the seven summits of the world. Another one is a story, and I believe it is a fictional story. I'd have to double check. I think so, but of a runner who has to get her leg amputated and how that affects her emotionally and what does she do with that, right? So just some great inspiring books to talk about pushing through when things are hard physically and what does that look like? Because a lot of times with coaching, we talk about emotional hardness and challenges, but what do you do when something's physically hard? So I love that focus on that. For science, some awesome books about Clara Barton and really understanding her. She's amazing. History, Great Battles for Boys, and big fan of Politically Incorrect Guide. So if you are open to reading both sides of history, I would really love the Politically Incorrect Guide books. I think war is interesting because it's always written from the perspective of the victor, right? And so I love to read both sides as much as you can, right? But when like we studied World War II, when and we studied um, more about Pearl Harbor or something like that, and looking at the Japanese side of why they bombed Pearl Harbor and really understanding that versus like, oh man, they're so bad, they bombed Pearl Harbor, but why did they do it? And so, why did the South try to pull away from the North? And really being willing to look at both sides of that if you are ready to take that plunge. And then just a couple books that for literature that are Civil War era and slavery period type of books that are really great. And then next month we'll do a Civil War, at least a part two, and then possibly a part three, but maybe just a part two, where we'll focus on some of the main characters, as you will, of biographies of people in the Civil War, and just learning a little bit about who they are, what their role was in the war, and just really learning about them. And so I am really excited that this is back. I'm so grateful for Emily for helping me. Thank you for being patient with me as I try to navigate some of these things and just trying to figure out my right balance. And sometimes I, like so many of you, I'm so human and I jump in and I take on too much and then I want to get rid of all of it. So just finding that middle ground. And so thank you for your patience with me. And so go ahead to coachmegthomas.com and you will see March's lesson plan. You can also, there'll be a link on my Instagram, so you can grab them there. But I'm excited to be back, excited to share these with you. And I hope that they continue to help you in your school. So go and grab those, my friend, and have a wonderful week. And I'll talk to you next time.